This is Arlene Sachs, and this is Sally Ann Sachs. And today we're going to have a little bit of reminisce a little bit. We've actually been doing this show for 10 years now, and when we began, we thought maybe we'd have enough for 20, maybe 25 shows. Nobody ever thought we'd still be doing this 10 years.
And we've done how many shows?
This is the 171st show.
And what this really reflects is not that we're any geniuses, really. It just goes to show how genealogy has grown, I think. And it's so mainstream now that...
It's not only mainstream because of the web. We're finding so many more ways of doing genealogy and so many different kinds of materials that we wouldn't have thought of 10 years ago.
Right, and more people are doing it.
Yeah. Well, when we began, we talked basically about the archives and the Library of Congress and the Holocaust
Local
Museum.
stuff.
Local things that people would do, and we tell them where to go and which entrance to go in. Well, now if we tell somebody, what's the first thing we tell them to do?
The website is...
That's right.
loc.gov.
That's right. Or National Archive, NARA.gov. It's the first thing they have to do. Then they go and look for the documents. So they're really, it's completely different from what we did 10 years ago. It is important to remember for the Library of Congress, though, that not everything is listed on the web. They've indexed going backwards till, I think, around 1970.
Yes.
But things published before that are still not on there.
Right. I've had to do some creative searching in their indexes to find
those.
Sometimes if you do it by title instead of by author, and you do it advanced searches and all kinds of things. That's my latest thing is now I need a course on, you know, I had a course on how to do research once upon a time. Now I need a course on how to do internet research.
Yeah, but not everything is on the internet for Library of Congress. And people do have to remember that if they're looking up a book that was written 100 years ago about a town or about a person or something, that they still have to go there to do that kind of research. We also talked about different kinds of problems that Jewish genealogists have.
And we should probably explain, if anybody's watching this for the first time, why we do that. Since the two of us are Jewish, we do what's called Jewish genealogy because Jews and other ethnic groups, American Indians and many, you know, immigrants from Poland and so on, facts of their history, their culture, their religion are such that it shapes the records that are kept and what you have to know in order to know where to go to find the records and what you have to know in order to understand what the records mean.
And one of our problems is names, that our people generally, if go to generalize, didn't have names more than 200 years ago.
Last names, you mean?
Last names, yeah. Obviously they had first names, but last names. Family names were not that common.
But I bet African Americans are going to have a similar problem. But so basically, we have focused a lot on the kinds of research, our research experiences and interests have shaped the shows we've done, though I think that many of our shows have had a more general applicability. You were listing the countries that we had covered.
23 different countries we did shows on. It's hard to believe.
Records from and how to get information.
How to get information.
And that, of course, is because the ancestors of most Jews in the U.S. today, the ancestors of most Jews alive in the world today, we don't live where our ancestors lived 150 years ago, is the best way to say it.
And let's say most of the Jews in this country today came from Eastern Europe. So you take Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and around the Mediterranean for the Sephardic Jews, and we all are going back to that general area 150 years ago. Except
you're an exception. You're a German Jew, and most German Jews came to the United States around the Civil War. Your family came as a result of the Germans and the Nazis, and that's another group. Yeah. But it does make a difference.
But it focuses my research into Germany very, very quickly. Because
yes, exactly.
We talked a lot about the breakthroughs that as new material has come out, and one of them was the Yad Vashem records. That show went on. We were both beta testers for that, and so we did the show, and it was aired right when they first went public.
We have to explain what that is. Yad Vashem is the Israeli Holocaust Memorial, and it has something called pages of testimony that are individual sheets of paper for individuals who were murdered in the Holocaust, and they have digitized their collection of pages of testimony, and they're doing their archives now, and they have 3.5 million names. It's the largest Jewish database on the web, and the numbers are growing. They're continuing. They're going to be up to 4 million soon. So yeah, that one was very exciting. For Jewish genealogists. It was tremendous, and the fact that they could do it was
to put these pages on it. And then when you go to their web page, of course, you wouldn't go directly there. You use another website now. We'll get to that. But you find the name, and you can actually see the piece of paper of who filled it out.
The software involved is so incredibly sophisticated. Because they had, what, 125 different spellings for the name Isaac.
Yeah.
And they've learned so much and made so many technological
advances through this.
That help all of us.
Breakthroughs that now other organizations, other museums are following their pattern and trying to do what
they're very they will not give out their name lists, but they will to certain groups, because we're dealing with them. My institute is now. They have a similar thing for localities, alternate spellings of localities, and they're willing to share that, so that's good. And then the Holocaust, the hot news this summer is that the last secret German archive of World War II is now open, thanks to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, to Paul Shapiro, the director of Holocaust education.
We'll talk about that is because, well, we'll get ahead of ourselves a little, but as soon as he's able, we're going to have him on the show, and he's going to talk to us about it. That's the International Tracing Service of the Red Cross, and they are finally making those records available. There aren't too many people. When they really have to be over 80 at this point to have much memory. To be a child survivor and have any memory of it.
There's still some in their 70s, a few around.
But they would have been very young.
Right, but one of the things that Paul and the archivist at Yad Vashem said, he sort of poo-pooed it all along. He said, you can't imagine the richness for genealogists. There's just one section that I hadn't even thought about. After the war, people were writing, trying to find out what happened to relatives, as they were to other organizations. Yeah. And they'd say, my mother, my sister. So the genealogical connections are breathtaking, I'm told.
Well, you were just at a meeting where they were trying to talk about some methods of doing this. So it's really even more overwhelming, I think, than Yad Vashem, because Yad Vashem, they had these single pages. At least that's what they were starting out with, and this is all sorts of different stuff. So among the other things we talked about was something called the 1,000 Children's Project, which is child survivors, children that were brought to this country. And that show has had more hits on our, we put all our shows for the last 2 years we've been putting all of our shows on the web once they've been shown on Channel 10 here, so anybody all over the world can access them.
And as I told you, I got an email yesterday from my cousin in Perth, Australia, saying, as I am typing this, I am watching you on YouTube. And I wrote back and said, what am I doing on YouTube? That was one of our shows. Yes.
But I think that YouTube must have linked directly into our show then, into our website.
It's pretty funny.
Anyway, people can look, please look at tracingroots.nova.org. You'll see a list of all the shows that we have done. Let us know if there's anything that you'd like us to repeat that we've done so long ago that might need updating.
Also, maybe our viewers might have topics that they would wish we would talk about.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be only Jewish. We'll try.
Obviously. So,
we'll find some.
But it would be good to know what other topics in genealogy we haven't touched that somebody would like to know about.
And there's the 20, I don't know, something around 20 shows that have been, that you can watch live on that. Not live, but watch the whole show. We've also talked about studies of family history where medicine is very important. And one of the first ones was Stanley Diamond's beta thalassemia project. And do you want to talk a little bit about what happened because of that?
Amazing. Stanley spent his childhood and young adulthood being told he was anemic and being given iron that didn't do any good. And finally, well into midlife, discovered that he carried something called the beta thalassemia trait, which is transmitted genetically. And became very concerned about warning people who might carry it, because if 2 carriers get it, then it's fatal. So Stanley went out, got into genealogy for that reason. And he went out to Salt Lake City, and he went to the Mormon library, and he got tired of looking at microfilms. And he said to himself, because he's a graduate of Harvard Business School, he thinks this way. He says, this is silliness. He said, people keep using the same films over and over and over again. There must be a more efficient way. So he started this project called Jewish Records Indexing Poland, where they indexed the names in these Mormon microfilms. Then he said, but there are all these records in Poland that the Mormons haven't filmed. And he went and he made an arrangement with the Polish government, with the Polish archives, and people kept saying to him, it's way too big, you can't do it. I always think of him whenever I get these big projects in my head. And he just started small, and it's huge. And it's a hugely successful, very almost seamless way to get Jewish records from Poland.
And not only that, but because of that beta thalassemia, he was able to trace it back several generations, and each time it's one partner he's
finally found who it was, a mutation in his family, and now he devotes himself to finding all the descendants of that person way back, so he can warn them. Yeah. And very often he'll call them up, and he'll be try to do it. Is anybody in your family have anemia? And somebody says, oh, you mean beta thalassemia? It's all over.
Well, that I think is one of the big stories. That was really the first genetic one that I knew of. The other one is that Franconia anemia, and we talked about that, which is another disease that was genetically transferred.
There's going to be lots more coming up in that. I hate when people say I'm not at liberty to say. I'm not at liberty to say, but the biggest Jewish genetic disease is Gaucher, is not Tay-Sachs, which people get tested for, it's Gaucher's. And now there's technology that's going to enable us, through DNA testing, to wipe out some of these diseases.
It's amazing what they can do with the DNA testing.
And the centrality of, another genealogy one. I don't remember how many years ago now, a young girl by the name of Allison Atlas developed leukemia.
Oh yes, I remember
and
that.
And she did die. No good match could be found. But at that time, the bone marrow transplants, they couldn't find an identical match, and the Jewish representation in the bone marrow databases was very small. But as a result of our local organization here, the Jewish Genealogy of Greater Washington, organized a project to try to find a match for her.
I remember all of us were tested.
And the numbers now of Jewish DNA in the international database is very high. And we have saved others. Yeah. Jay Feinstein is one that we all helped look for
I
matches.
remember my son was called to come back for further testing, and then the further testing showed
my daughter-in-law actually gave bone marrow to somebody. Yes.
Okay. Well, some of the other things we talked about, the Alexandria, Virginia, Jewish history. We talked about African American history in Fauquier County, so that's very local. I think the biggest thing that of course is the web, and there's no way around that. And we mentioned Yad Vashem before, and the Stephen Morse database to get into
his tools.
He doesn't have the data himself. All he's developed is advanced
way of
programming.
Well, he talks about harvesting the data.
Yeah,
I will tell you he has data. But he does what's called deep linking.
Yes, he has developed a way to search these databases better than we can do ourselves.
And the very funniest thing is now Ellis Island, which squawked like crazy about his stuff, now they link to him. They tell people that the best way to search the Ellis Island database is not to go to the Ellis Island website, but to go to the Steve Morse website and search Ellis Island from his website.
On another show, we did talking about The Source, which is a book on doing American genealogy. It has several pages devoted to that web page, telling you exactly how to go about using it to the best advantage, and who should use which colors and so on that he has in there.
He's made things very simple in a lot of ways.
And it's really helped a lot and makes it much easier and faster.
Right.
Again, I want to say look at tracingroots.nova.org. and most of the shows from the last few years have been digitized, and they are on the web, and you can watch them there. And let us know if there's something you want us to talk more about, or something that
inevitably, we're going to talk more about the next thing on your list here, which is DNA.
Yes, we've done 4 shows on it in 3 years. 3 of them within the last year.
And you have a personal experience, or your husband does, which I think is very useful genealogically. Now, he had his DNA tested, and he found out what exactly?
That he does not match any of the other Saxes.
People whose last names are Sachs.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think I disagree with Bennett Greenspan on, because he suggests having only 12 done. And then the reason he's doing that is because he thinks 2 people that think they're cousins are going to have it done, and this will tell them right away whether they link or don't link. But eventually, I can see everybody's going to have more done. So you might as well have them done to begin with. And that was Sid's logic.
Well, no, I think what I should say, first of all, Bennett Greenspan is the founder and CEO of something called Family Tree DNA, a company in Houston, Texas, which is the one doing the National Geographic stuff.
Yeah, but they test different locations than the one he's testing for genealogy.
Okay. Bennett is trying to save people money when they do that. Yeah. If people, I've started now a family DNA project, all the Amders, and that's because, that's another thing that's hot in genealogy, is putting a website for a family name.
That's something in the future. Let's get.
Okay, yeah. but what I'm saying is we have different branches of people whose names are Amder, and what we wonder is, are we related?
Yeah.
And Bennett said the best thing to do is to do the 12 marker test, because it's the least expensive. And he said it won't tell you if you are related, it will tell you if you cannot be related. So if it turns out that you cannot be related, then you're done. If that's all you want to know is whether you guys are related, then he said the most cost-efficient way to do it is that. If you're looking for something else, which is what your husband was looking for.
We sort of suspected it because, as you know, we could never link up to any of the other Saxes outside the ones directly up from his line that we knew about. And so he went ahead and had the 36, 37, whatever it is, done. And lo and behold, we didn't match the Saxes. But what he did match is most of the people that he did match, and there weren't that many, maybe a dozen, half a dozen, they were coenamed, which he is. And theoretically, the so-called coename gene was on a J1, and he's J2. Unless I have that backwards right now, which is also very interesting. And then somebody contacted us, a geneticist, and I hesitate to talk about this because I really don't understand it, but he wanted to do some further testing, and it's being done by another company. And we have to get back to Bennett Greenspan on it, too. But I found this whole thing very interesting.
But the most interesting for you and me is the one that when we had Sonia Rosa, who was a local Spanish teacher from Puerto Rico. Right, who found out that her father's DNA exactly matches 43 other guys, who all but 7 of whom currently are Jewish, and everyone else but her has a history of having been Jewish. And her father in Puerto Rico had no idea of
He says he's black on top of it. You know, it just doesn't seem to. Well, I can see that if somebody married outside the religion, they didn't pass that information down because he was outside.
We know more now than when she was on the show.
Yeah.
And what has been found, and I just spoke to Bennett for about an hour a few nights ago. First of all, this group, which calls themselves the Worth group by taking first initials.
They took the first initials of the first 5 men that matched.
They've all done 67 markers. And as a result, he can tell you that at the level of 99% plus probability, I mean, that means there's more than 99 chances out of 100, the most remote common ancestor of this group, which is now 43 families, lived no more than 400 years ago. Okay, 400 years ago would take us to 1600. He independently got information about Sonia Rosa's family. Because one thought was, well, maybe her family showed up in Puerto Rico in the 19th century. No, no. The Roses have been in Puerto Rico since almost the colonization of Puerto Rico. So it was
Definitely
it has to be that all of these people whose ancestors are Ashkenazi Eastern European Jews at one point
were Spanish.
That were Spanish. There was a Spanish Jew who is probably the ancestor. And Bennett said, scratching his head, he said, but how did they get there? And I said, well, Bennett, you know the migration route, which he hadn't.
Yeah.
And it's just phenomenal. Now they have, but what they also did you see the article they wrote afterwards?
Our last article on Albertina is very interesting on how they graphed it and how the relationships are. And
now they can do like a family tree. They call it a phylogenetic tree. Yeah. So they can show how you relate to that one most remote ancestor. So for example, maybe you and I, or let's say if we had brothers, maybe we descend from somebody who's further down the line, whereas somebody else may descend only, well, let's say that most common ancestor had 8 sons, and you might descend from one son and you might descend from another, or a couple of people might descend from a grandson of one son, you know. So it shows the relationships, and it begins to give you sources to research in a practical way. It's the first practical stuff. That we have from the DNA.
I think that the DNA, and I'm sure we'll be doing more shows on that because it's changing so rapidly, and they're learning so much more all the time. But we did Sonia Rosa, we did Herb Upshur, who's the one who started the Hupshur, who started the Worth, quote unquote, Worth group, and we did Bennett Greenspan, who's the CEO.
Right.
And folks out there, if you haven't seen those shows, get on tracingroots.novant.org and watch those 3 shows. I think they're the three most interesting shows that we've done because they're so different.
Well, and it's such cutting edge stuff, you know. There's another.
Okay, go ahead. We're going to run out of time soon. You want to look a little bit at some of the things that we're getting to in the future.
Okay.
We've got Ava Sloan and Marion Smith, who are with the Homeland Security.
No, it's under Homeland Security. It's called the USCIS. It took the place of the old INS. The Immigration and Naturalization Service is no more. When Homeland Security was established, it was folded into that, under that umbrella, and now it's called the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service.
And they are planning on putting things on the web and having a way to request information. They're going to have an index on the web, and you can request.
Bottom line, they're going to charge for services that used to be free. But, if you really want us, they claim they're going to give us much better service. But we are not going to be allowed to go through Freedom of Information to get records anymore. How about that?
But they will be coming and talking to us as soon as they are ready to go on the web, which we hope will be in the. Originally, they said
by the end of 2007.
So hopefully.
Well, what's holding it up is figuring out the fee schedule. Congress learned about genealogy. They decided they were.
Didn't the
No, this is what happened. Listen to this.
They can make money.
They passed a law that said every government agency has to be self-supporting in the services it provides for the public, and you know the archives was giving all these services and immigration service. They was costing a lot of money, so now we have to pay for it.
Another show that we hope to be doing soon is Paul Shapiro of the Holocaust Museum, and he's going to describe how they're going to handle the International Tracing Service. They have received the first batch of these millions and millions of records that they have, and that's going to be very complicated. Also, but he'll tell us the beginnings of what they're going to be doing.
And then we had Logan Kleinwax on a while ago, but he has started a new project called Showa Connect, in which it's sort of like Stanley Diamond's idea, which is, you know, the same people are visiting the same sources all the time. This is not efficient. If I'm looking at a certain page of testimony and you look at the same page of testimony, chances are good that we have some interest in common genealogically.
And he's going to keep track of it.
He wants to try to keep that information so that we could find each other.
And again, he's not going to make any of that public, but he will give, if you match somebody, you get the email address, and that's all.
Right.
And
yes, Privacy is, of course, a big issue.
We're down to less than 2 minutes, but you wanted to also talk about this new website for Million.
F-A and then million.com. And
Okay.
I don't know quite what to make of it, but a guy named Dan Rolls, who is an Israeli, and his wife produce their family trees, it says, through genetic testing. He claims he's some young self-made billionaire. He's going to do the whole world. And he claims to have designed the technology that I'm trying to design. So we'll see where if you've got John Smith on one set database and Tom Jones on another, you can show that they're the same person.
Yeah.
We'll see if he really has.
I can't quite picture how you're going to come up with, I mean, I can understand the Isaacs, the 150 or whatever it was, different forms of spelling of that. But
it's based on if you know a lot of information about the two people. If they have the same mother, the same birth dates, they were born in the same places, they have the same siblings, that kind of stuff. Then you can say chances are good that they're the same people at a certain
do you want to really, we've got less than a minute left, can you talk about those?
Okay, I did my Amder DNA, and what did we find at 12? Well, the other Amders haven't sent in yet, but in the meantime, we matched 6 other people, all of whom are Jewish, and then I talked to Bennett, and he said, oh, and by the way, Sally, you matched 4 Spaniards, 4 different Spanish families living in Spain today that are not Jewish. Oh, that's very interesting. How do we happen to match them? Makes you wonder again about the Jews who were forced out of Spain, and half of them left and half of them converted.
I think in the long run we're going to find all Ashkenazic Jews originated in Spain.
Well, we all originated in Eretz Israel, probably. But it's very interesting because, indeed, half of the Jews didn't leave Spain, they converted.
Yeah.
So,
okay, well, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.